In this presentation, we will record factory overhead and apply a factory overhead to jobs within QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Desktop. Here we are in our practice problem 3. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view dropdown and selecting the open windows list. We're first going to consider our objective by going to our Excel worksheet. So within our Excel worksheet, we're going to be focusing in on the factory overhead items. That's going to be including all these items down here. I'm going to make this green right now so we can see them. You'll recall that the factory overhead items, typically I would think of them as any item that you can't apply directly to a job. So normally under normal kind of job cost system, we would say, hey, I can't put it to work in process because I don't know what the job is. Therefore, I'm going to put it into the factory overhead so that I can then apply it to the job in some future point. At this time then, notice we're not using these two accounts. We're applying them directly to cost of goods sold. Same kind of concept though. I can't apply it to cost of goods sold because I can't support it by which job it's going to go to. I don't know which job it's going to go to because I don't know how to allocate it. Therefore, usually we put it into the factory overhead and then we can allocate it. However, what I'm going to do here is basically we're going to say that we are going to allocate it as we go and put it directly to the cost of goods sold as we allocate it as we go through each of the items for the overhead. And that's going to make it a lot more simplified, that we're just going to apply it out as we go. But as we do that, as we discussed in the prior problem, you're going to have to figure out exactly how you're going to allocate it to the open jobs that are currently open, and the same kind of issues will be involved with that. The thing we'll do new here is that we're going to be basically setting up different factory overhead accounts so that they will be reflected on the accounts and in the system so that we can see them. So we'll set up items for the factory overhead rather than having just one account that's going to reflect that factory overhead. So, for example, if we took a look at this one, this first one says that the indirect labor paid and assigned to the factory we would generally debit factory overhead and then credit cash, which is going to be basically the same for most of these transactions. Then we would support it, so that there's the journal entry would be to cash and cost of goods sold, and then we would support that with this item. So this, and this is going to be how we broke it out in the system. That adds up to the 14,000. Now, we broke it out here. We have to decide some type of percentage that we're going to break it out to know which job to assign it to. In other words, we're basically saying we're not going to take it through factory overhead. We're going to assign it to the job. I'm going to keep it designated under factory overhead to let us know that we did use some type of allocation process to do this. And so that's why I'm going to keep it under the subcategory of factory overhead. All right, so let's do that. How are we going to do that in QuickBooks? We're going to go back to QuickBooks. We're going to write a check. So we're going to write a check. And this first one was for indirect labor. So, and the date was on the 20th, I believe. I hope. Let's keep it at the 20th. Shouldn't matter too much. And we're going to say employee 2. So we're not going to be dealing with payroll issues here. Same kind of concept we talked about when we did the direct labor with regards to payroll. We're going to set them up as a vendor, and then we're going to go to the items. Now within the items, I'm actually going to add items related to the specific type of overhead. In other words, I'm not just going to put it to overhead here as we did in the prior problem. We'll try to list out the different types of overhead. And this one I'm going to say is indirect labor. And that could be anything that, someone that's do janitorial work in the shop where we do everything, or a supervisor salary that basically works on different jobs and whatnot. We have to somehow allocate their time to the job. So I'm going to say indirect labor, tab, setting that up. We're going to call it a service item. I'm going to call it a service item. I'm going to say the double-sided service item as we saw before. I'm going to say indirect labor is going to be here and there. And then I want to put this into an expense account, which I'm going to create as well. So I'm going to create a new expense account called indirect labor, tab, setting that up. And this one's going to be a cost of goods sold account, just like all the other accounts we've set up. This is going to be cost of goods sold. And I'm going to put it under the sub account now of the overhead. So you'll remember we created a parent account for overhead. And that'll still be a cost of goods sold type of account, But by putting it into the overhead account, it'll basically say, hey, these are the items that we had to use to allocate out using some kind of allocation method. So I'm going to say save and close, and the other side is going to be going to income. So there's the other side, and then we'll say okay. So, and then the indirect labor is going to be 266 for job 14. So it's going to be amount 2660 for job number 14. And then we have the, actually, was I on labor? I want indirect, yeah. And then I'm on 4620. Indirect labor is going to be 4620, and this is job number 14. And note that this amount should actually be job number 15 and job number 16. So you can keep it at job number 14 now, and we're gonna fix it, or you can just put it in there. It should be 15 and 16. We're gonna go back to it in the future. Then finally, we had the 6720. So indirect labor, we're gonna say 6720, job number 14. So there we have that. And so what's this going to do? It's going to be reducing the checking account. Indirect labor is now posting to a cost of goods sold, given the fact that we set this up to do so, specifically a cost of goods sold under the parent account of overhead and in an account called indirect labor for cost of goods sold. It'll also be applying it to the job, of course, job 14. Note once again that the job should be 14, 15, and 16, not 14 across. It should be 14, 15, and 16. So now we're going to say save and new. So now we're back in Excel, and we're going to do this again. This time we're going to be doing this for the indirect materials. So the indirect materials is reflected by this 30,000, same journal entry, debiting the cost of goods sold, crediting cash, but this time for the indirect materials that we're just buying like grout or something like that, that we then need to apply to the jobs in some type of way. So we've got that 30,000. If I go back over here, same journal entry, same accounts that are going to be affected, although we will be breaking this out in the cost of goods sold, breaking it out by category in more detail. And then if I go to the job, we're going to break this out by job 14, 15, and 16 by the 19, the 33, and the 48. So that's going to be the 5.7, which is, the 30,000 times the 19. And then the 30,000 times the 33, which is the 9.9, and the 14.4, that adds up to the 30,000. Same process we'll be doing in QuickBooks. We're going to go back to QuickBooks. We're going to write our check, and we're going to say this is going to be for the indirect materials. I'm going to say Staples, just another supplier we're going to purchase from to keep it different than Home Depot. And then we're going to say that this is going to be for the amount of 30,000. And then I'm going to create a new item. Once again, the item is going to be indirect materials. And you could get more detailed on the type of material that's indirect and whatnot. But I'm going to say yes. And then we want to set this up. I'm going to set it up as a service item. Indirect materials. We're going to have it double-sided. It's going to be here and here. And then we're going to have indirect materials new account that we're going to set up as well. Tab, setting that up. That's going to be a cost of goods sold type of account. So we're going to go down to cost of goods sold, sub account of the factory overhead account. So there it is. So now we're going to say save and close. And then the other side is going to be going to an income account. And okay. So note as we do this, if we go to the lists and we go to the chart of accounts, we're adding, the accounts here. So we're going to have another account that's going to be under the factory overhead there. And we added to the lists, the item lists as we're going. We're adding, for this time, we have the indirect labor here. Back to the check. So then we're going to be putting the cost, and we're going to pull this from here. It's going to be for job number 14, the 5,007. So we're going to say 5700 for job number 14 will be billable. Then we're going to go indirect labor again. That's going to be for the second one, which is going to be the 9,900. So we're going to put this in the books for 9900, job number 15. And then we have the indirect labor for job number 16, which is going to be that 14.4. So 14.4, 14400 for job number 16, and that is billable. That should add up to the 30,000. Looks good. Let's go save and new. So now we're going to say save and new. and yes, and let's do this again. We're then going to say that the next overhead type of item relates to the utilities. 12,000, same journal entry, debit cost of goods sold, credit cash, and then we're going to break that out in a similar fashion, meaning we're going to break it out by 19, 33, and 48%. This, and this are going to be our numbers that add up to the 12,000. I'm going to make those green. And that's what we'll do now. We'll write another check, same process for it. So we're going to go back over and tab through here. And I believe this was utility. So I'm going to put it in Edison. I've already set up the vendor for Edison if you need to set it up. The Edison is just a vendor. I'm going to say we're paying the utilities to. It's going to be 12,000 that we are paying total, not 1,200. We're going to say 12,000. And then we're on the item side. We're going to have to add a new item, which is going to be utilities. And you might want to break out like utilities for the factory or something like that when we set up the account versus, other utilities that might be for the sales utilities or something like that. That's not cost of goods sold related we'll see that in a second. I'm going to make it a service item, and we are going to say that it's going to be here and double-sided. And then we're going to create a new account. And the new account, I don't think I spelled this right, but utilities. Utilities. If it's not spelled right, I apologize. And then we're going to set that up and say tab and set that up. And then we're going to go down to the cost of goods sold. And that looks good. Now, again, this is the account where you might want to set up if you have utilities for the sales office, utilities for the admin office, utilities for the factory or wherever you make the stuff. You might want to label it for, utilities factory. But it will also be under the sub account that we're going to set up of the factory overhead. So that'll give us an indication as well. So we're going to go into the factory overhead and save and close. And then the other side is going to be going to income. And then we're going to say OK. And then we'll apply out the costs. And the cost is going to be for 2,280. So we've got 2280 for job number 14. And then utilities, we're going to pick up the second one, which is going to be the 3960. So we're going to say 3960 for job number 15. And then utilities is going to be for the amount of 5760. So we're going to say 5760, job number 16. So there we have it. And then I'm going to say save and new again. So we're going to say save and new. Yes. And then let's see what we have next. Next one, similar process, is going to be the rent. So rent, we're going to pay that at the end of the month. And the rent is for the 20,000. So now we're up here, same journal entry, debit cost of goods sold, credit cash, and then we're going to break it out in our same kind of format. We're going to break it out by 19, 33, and 48 between the jobs that we currently have open. That's going to be this, and this, which add up to that 20,000. If I right click on that, make it green, that's what we're going to apply out this time. Same process. We're going to go back to QuickBooks. I'm going to make a new vendor. So I'm just going to call it rental company. That's going to be their vendor name. And the amount is going to be the 20,000. Tabbing through here, we're on the item. We're going to have to call this rent, factory rent, equipment rent, some type of rent, we're going to say on it. And then we're going to say tab and yes. And it's going to be a service part. I'm going to give it a double-sided rent on both sides. And then we're going to say that the expense is going to be rent as well. And again, you probably would want to give it more detail to indicate the type of rent and that because you might have multiple rent, but I'm just going to keep it there and we'll set it up. It's going to be a cost of goods sold type of account. It's going to be in the sub account of overhead because once again, we have to apply it out in some format. Sub account of overhead, and then we're going to say save and close. The income account is simply going to be income and OK. So there's the rent. We're going to break this out now. It's going to be broken out by 3,800. So we're going to say the cost 3,800. This is for job number 14, billable. Then we have rent the cost is going to be for the 6600. So we're going to say 6600, job number 15, then rent, and this is going to be for the amount of the 9600. So we'll say 9600, job number 16. Job number 16. All right. So then I'm going to say, we're going to do this one more time. I'm going to say save and new. It's going to be a slight twist on this last one, though. So we saved a nice twist for the last one. And that's going to be the depreciation. So the depreciation, usually we do with a journal entry, and that's going to be this item. Usually we do that with a journal entry. It's going to be the same kind of concept here. We've kind of memorized debit depreciation expense, credit accumulated depreciation, possibly. You might have memorized that. But now we're going to debit the cost of goods sold because it's going to be part of the job, and then we're going to credit not cash like we did before, but accumulated depreciation. However, we're still going to have to apply it to the jobs. So we're going to apply it to the jobs in the same ratio we did before. That's going to be the 19, 33, and 48. So this, and this is going to add up to our 33,000. Those will be our numbers that we're going to use. The problem is in QuickBooks now, we're not writing a check. I mean, cash isn't going down. So we're still going to use the check function, but this time we're going to use it in order to apply the items. We're going to do one of those zero type checks in QuickBooks. So we're going to go back to QuickBooks. I'm going to do it not in the normal checking account, but the clearing account. And that'll allow us to have that zero check not in our normal checking account. I'm going to make this as of the 31st. There's not going to be anything up top. We're going to go right down to the items. And then I'm going to call this a new item, depreciation equipment, let's call it. And computer's doing slow stuff for some reason. And then we're going to copy that. And then we're going to tab and say save or upload this or create. And then we want it to be a service item. We're going to have it double-sided. I'm going to put the same description. The expense then, we need a new expense account, which is depreciation on equipment. Set it up. And we're going to make it a cost of goods sold type of account. Sub-account of the factory overhead. Same setup. We're going to say save and close. Other side is going to be going to the income account. Income. And okay. Now we just do our same process. It's going to be 5,007 for job 14. So cost 5700 for job number 14. It's billable. Then we're going to go depreciation expense again. And this is going to be for job number 15, 9,900 for job number 15, 9900. Job 15, billable, depreciation expense. This is going to be for job number 16, which is going to be the 14.4. So we'll give it the 14.4 for job number 16, and that'll be billable. Now we don't want anything coming out of cash. Where do we want this? This will be driving the account to that depreciation expense going to cost of goods sold account we set up. The other side needs to go to accumulated depreciation. So we're going to go back to the expenses side. We're going to put this to accumulated depreciation, a negative 30,000. And that'll make the actual check zero and allow us still to use the functions of it to apply this out. Let's check it out. We're going to say save and close. And let's see if this did what we hoped it was going to do. It's going to go up top. We're going to go to the reports. We're going to go to the accounting and taxes and the trial balance. Take a look at the trial balance from 12/31/20 to, let's make it, let's do that again. We're going to say 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. And so there we have our items, and now we have the factory overhead items listed down here. Let's look at it on the profit and loss report. If we go to the reports drop down, company and financial profit and loss report, changing the dates from 01/01/20 to 12/31/20. Now we see under the cost of goods sold, which totals out at 674. If I go back to our Excel worksheet, then we have the cost of goods sold 674 here. So it looks, so again, we on our worksheet, remember, we just grouped it all into one account. In Excel, in QuickBooks, we put all the accounts under basically the account type of cost of goods sold, and then further broke out between the direct labor, so and materials and overhead. If I minimize those, then we can see it broken out by our categories. So we'd have the cost of goods sold if we just want to see the one, number. And then we've got the direct labor. And within direct labor, we didn't break any subcategories out. We could if we wanted to. And then we have the direct materials, which of course includes all this information, the factory overhead, which is here. Now let's take a look at our job cost sheet. If we go to the reports up top, if we go to then the job and time, we want to look at the estimate versus actual summary. And then we see the total here adding up to the 757. If I want to take a look at the Excel worksheet, note that all of our open jobs add up to the 757. The difference between the 757 and what's on the trial balance, which we just saw was that 674, is the open items. Those two open items, which again we can see on QuickBooks by running the report for 01/01/20 to 12/30, or let's say 01/01/19 to 12/31/19, and there we see that 83,000. That's our reconciling item. And then if I ran this report for 12/31/20 to, let's do that one more time, 01/01/20 to 12/31/20, that gives us our 674. And that's useful because if I take that and tie it to the profit and loss report, we get to that same 674 for all the cost of goods sold. So that means that allows us to note that we didn't misallocate a job. We still need to know what all the open jobs are, so in case we need to do any adjusting entry as well as we've seen in the past. Now let's take a look at one more report. Reports drop down. We're going to go to the jobs report. We're going to go down to the detailed report, estimate versus actual detailed report. Let's take a look at the third job, job number 16, and then we have our detail broken out here. So here's all the activities. We're concentrating here on the actual costs. So we have the actual costs broken out. Again, the actual versus the estimate isn't going to be an exact number because we basically just kind of picked numbers to put in there, but the total should sum up and give the idea of how this would lay out or play out.